In the 1930s, American highways were ruled by steel giants. They were built like tanks, and they hemorrhaged money with every mile. But one frustrated trucker started a quiet rebellion. He would bring a new kind of truck, not with steel, but with the same metal used for airplanes. The industry giants like Mack and International Harvester laughed. They called it a tin can, a fragile experiment destined to fail. But this experiment would do more than just survive. It would be sold to a foreign rival, forced to execute its own design, and eventually learn to drive itself. This is the story of how a truck left for dead by its own country became the undisputed king of the American road. The Freightliner story doesn't begin with a plan to build trucks. It begins with a problem. Leyland James ran Consolidated Freightways, one of the leading truckers in the Northwest. But by the 1930s, the available trucks were heavy, unreliable, and hemorrhaged money with every mile. The steel behemoths of this era were built like tanks. They could handle the load, but they wasted fuel hauling their own colossal weight. James watched his drivers battle mechanical breakdowns and dismal fuel economy. Every pound of truck meant one less pound of paying cargo. Frustrated, James decided to solve the problem himself. He partnered with engineers who shared his vision for something radically different. Instead of steel, they would use aluminum. Instead of a traditional long nose, they'd put the engine directly under the cab. This cab-over-engine design would maximize cargo space while staying within the era's strict length laws. The first prototypes looked nothing like traditional trucks. The aluminum body gleamed silver in the sunlight. The flat-faced cab sat directly over the engine. The advantages were immediate: better road visibility, tighter turns in city traffic, maximum cargo space within legal limits, improved weight distribution. For freight companies operating under the era's strict 35-foot overall length regulations, every foot mattered. The COE design could save up to 6 feet compared to conventional long-nose trucks, translating directly to increased revenue through larger cargo capacity. Industry veterans called them tin cans. Established manufacturers like International Harvester and Mack dismissed the lightweight design as a gimmick. They'd been building heavy steel trucks for decades. Why change now? But James's trucks delivered results. They hauled more cargo with less fuel. Unlike steel, their aluminum construction was immune to rust. The cab-over design gave drivers a commanding view of the road and simplified docking in tight spaces. James founded Freightways Manufacturing in 1939, establishing the production facility in Salt Lake City, Utah in 1940. The engineering breakthroughs came fast. They developed new welding techniques for aluminum. They redesigned suspension systems to handle the different weight distribution. They created cab mounting systems that isolated drivers from engine noise and vibration. The name Freightliner captured exactly what James wanted to achieve. These weren't just trucks. They were freight-hauling machines designed by people who actually moved cargo for a living. Every design decision came from real-world experience, not engineering theory. Early customers were mostly other freight companies who understood the economics. A Freightliner could legally haul more cargo than steel competitors. That extra capacity meant more revenue per trip. The fuel savings added up over thousands of miles. Word spread through the trucking community. Independent drivers started asking their fleet managers about the aluminum trucks. Mechanics discovered that aluminum bodies were easier to repair than steel. Insurance companies noticed fewer accident claims because of the better visibility. But the established truck makers weren't giving up. They had dealer networks, financing programs, and decades of customer relationships. They could afford to wait and see if this aluminum experiment would last. James kept improving the design. Each new truck incorporated lessons learned from drivers and mechanics. The cab became more comfortable. The engine access improved. The electrical systems became more reliable. By 1942, Freightliner had established itself as something different in American trucking. These weren't the cheapest trucks you could buy, but they were the most efficient. For companies that understood the total cost of ownership, Freightliner offered something no one else could match. The aluminum revolution had begun. James had proven that innovation could challenge decades of conventional thinking. But the year 1942 brought with it a different kind of demand. A demand so high it would force Leyland James to sacrifice his entire truck production and leave his new market wide open to competitors. The entire trucking industry was about to be remade. December 7th, 1941 changed everything for American industry. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, Leyland James knew his aluminum dream would have to wait. The military needed every ounce of aluminum for aircraft production. Freightliner's factories pivoted overnight. Instead of building civilian trucks, they manufactured aircraft parts and military vehicles. The lightweight construction techniques James had developed for trucks proved perfect for airplane components. His engineers applied their aluminum welding expertise to bomber fuselages and fighter plane parts. The aluminum shortage nearly killed the company. The War Production Board allocated aluminum based on military priorities. Civilian truck production wasn't even on the list. James watched his competitors switch to steel and keep building trucks while his factory sat idle for months. But the war forged valuable lessons into Freightliner's DNA. Military specifications demanded absolute reliability under extreme conditions. Every component had to work perfectly or soldiers died. This military-grade thinking would transform how Freightliner built civilian trucks after the war. James's engineers learned new manufacturing techniques working on aircraft. They discovered stronger aluminum alloys. They developed better corrosion resistance. They figured out how to build lighter structures that were actually stronger than steel equivalents. They returned with a new commitment to military-grade redundancy, concept unheard of in the civilian sector. Every critical system now had a backup. When the war ended in 1945, America exploded with economic growth. Returning veterans bought homes in new suburbs. Factories converted from military to civilian production. Interstate commerce boomed as Americans bought cars, appliances, and everything else they'd done without during the war. This created exactly the opportunity James had been waiting for. The post-war economy needed efficient freight transportation. His lightweight trucks could haul more cargo for less money than anything else on the road. Rebuilding the civilian truck line took time. The aluminum supply was still limited. James had to compete with aircraft manufacturers who paid higher prices for the same materials. But by 1947, new Freightliners were rolling off the production line again. The post-war trucks incorporated everything learned during the war years. The aluminum alloys were stronger, the welding was better, the electrical systems were more reliable. Military-grade components replaced civilian parts wherever possible. Production volumes remained small but steady. By 1950, annual production had reached 116 trucks, primarily for consolidated freightways. The breakthrough came in 1949 when Freightliner made its first sale to an external customer. Hyster Company bought a Model A64 Freightliner bubble-nose truck, marking the company's entry into the broader commercial market. That historic truck now sits in the Smithsonian Institution's automotive collection, where it remains as a testament to Freightliner's innovation. Early external customers noticed the difference immediately. The aluminum construction and cab-over design delivered fuel economy advantages that steel competitors couldn't match. Over a year of long-haul operations, those fuel savings helped offset the higher purchase price. But success brought new challenges. Peterbilt had established itself on the West Coast, building premium trucks for loggers and construction companies. Kenworth dominated the Northwest with rugged trucks designed for mountain highways. International Harvester had dealer networks everywhere. These competitors couldn't ignore Freightliner anymore. They started developing their own lightweight designs. Peterbilt experimented with aluminum cabs. Kenworth redesigned their cab-over models. International began offering more fuel-efficient engines. The competition forced innovation. James's engineers developed new cab designs that were quieter and more comfortable. They improved the suspension systems to reduce driver fatigue on long trips. They redesigned the engine cooling systems to handle the heat generated by putting the engine directly under the cab. Independent truck drivers started paying attention. These were the owner-operators who bought their own trucks and contracted with freight companies. They understood that every gallon of fuel and every hour of downtime came directly out of their profits. Word spread at truck stops and driver cafes. Freightliner drivers reported better fuel economy, fewer breakdowns, and higher earnings. The aluminum trucks might cost more upfront, but they made more money over their lifetime. By 1950, Freightliner had established itself as the premium choice for serious freight operations. They weren't the biggest truck manufacturer, but they had the most loyal customers. Fleet managers who tried Freightliner rarely switched back to steel trucks. For drivers navigating the new interstates, this wasn't just metal, it was luxury. It was like moving from a coffin to a hotel room, one long-haul driver recalled. You could finally stand up in the sleeper, and the tilt cab meant your mechanic wasn't cussing you out anymore. James had proven his concept, but he faced a new problem. Demand was growing faster than his small company could handle. He needed capital to expand production, develop new models, and build a national dealer network. The established truck manufacturers had deep pockets and nationwide distribution. They could afford to wait for Freightliner to make a mistake. James needed a partner who understood his vision and had the resources to compete with the giants. The phone call that changed everything came in 1951. White Motor Company, a manufacturing giant, wanted to distribute Freightliner trucks through their dealer network. For Leyland James, it meant choosing between limited distribution or accessing White's national dealer network, while maintaining Freightliner's independence. White Motor Company wasn't just another truck manufacturer. They built everything from delivery trucks to heavy construction equipment. More importantly, they understood that Freightliner represented the future of long-haul trucking. The distribution agreement made sense for both companies. James got the national distribution network he needed to compete without giving up ownership. White got access to the most innovative truck design in America through their dealer network. White's vision was ambitious. They wanted to make Freightliner the premium truck brand in America. Not the cheapest, but the most profitable for customers who understood total cost of ownership. The partnership transformed Freightliner almost immediately. White's manufacturing expertise helped streamline production. Their dealer network put Freightliner trucks in cities where James had never sold a single unit. Their financing programs made it easier for small trucking companies to buy premium equipment. This was the golden age of cab-over design. The interstate highway system was under construction, and length regulations favored trucks with shorter wheelbases. Freightliner's cab-over design maximized cargo space while meeting legal requirements. The engineering innovations came fast. In 1953, Freightliner introduced the overhead sleeper berth for long-haul applications, giving drivers a place to rest during mandatory breaks. The revolutionary 90-degree tilt-forward cab design arrived in 1958, allowing mechanics to access the engine by tilting the entire cab forward instead of crawling underneath. For the first time, drivers weren't fighting the wheel in every city traffic jam, thanks to power steering. Cargo arrived undamaged, shielded from punishing roads by air suspension. And on the open highway, new aerodynamic designs didn't just cheat the wind. They saved thousands in fuel, 1 mile at a time. But the real breakthrough was cultural. Freightliner became known as the truck driver's truck. These were machines built by people who understood what professional drivers needed. The cabs were designed for comfort during long trips. The controls were positioned where drivers could reach them easily. The visibility was better than anything else on the road. Independent owner-operators embraced the brand. These were drivers who owned their trucks and contracted with freight companies. They needed equipment that would make money, not just haul freight. Freightliner's combination of fuel efficiency, reliability, and resale value made economic sense. The dealer network expansion was crucial. White established Freightliner dealers in every major trucking market. These weren't just sales outlets. They were service centers staffed by mechanics who understood aluminum construction and cab-over engineering. By the late 1960s, Freightliner dominated the long-haul trucking market. They had the highest market share among premium truck manufacturers. Their customers reported the best fuel economy and lowest maintenance costs in the industry. But success created new problems. White Motor Company was struggling financially. They'd expanded too fast in too many markets. Their car division was losing money. Their industrial equipment business faced intense competition. The growing tensions became obvious by the early 1970s. White needed cash and wanted to focus on their profitable divisions. Freightliner was successful, but it tied up capital that White needed elsewhere. James and the Freightliner management team watched nervously as White's financial problems worsened. They'd built something special, but they were part of a company that might not survive. The partnership that had made Freightliner a national success was about to end. The question was whether the truck division would survive the breakup. In 1974, Freightliner terminated its distribution agreement with White Motor Company due to White's severe financial troubles. This marked the end of a relationship that had lasted from 1951, during which White had distributed Freightliner trucks through its dealer network. Freightliner became a freestanding manufacturer and distributor while remaining owned by its parent company, Consolidated Freightways. Ending the White distribution agreement meant rebuilding market presence. White had provided dealer networks and marketing support. Now Freightliner, still owned by Consolidated Freightways, had to establish its own distribution channels while competing against giants like International Harvester and Mack Trucks. The timing was catastrophic. Federal regulations were changing in ways that hurt Freightliner's core advantage. The Motor Carrier Act of 1980 had unleashed deregulation that fundamentally shifted the industry, allowing longer truck combinations and making the compact cab-over design less critical. Conventional long-haul trucks could now haul just as much cargo legally. This regulatory shift devastated Freightliner's market position. For 30 years, their cab-over design had been the most efficient way to maximize cargo capacity. Suddenly, drivers could choose conventional trucks that were easier to maintain and more comfortable to drive. The cab-over decline happened faster than anyone expected. Drivers preferred conventional trucks because the engine was accessible from the front instead of tilting the entire cab. Mechanics liked them because repairs were simpler. Fleet managers discovered that conventional trucks had better resale values. Freightliner's sales plummeted. Their factories were tooled for cab-over production, but the market was shifting to conventional designs. Retooling would cost millions they didn't have. Without new products, they couldn't compete. The financial situation was challenging. Consolidated Freightways faced significant pressure from industry-wide difficulties. But while the parent company's revenues were a massive $1.7 billion, profits had utterly collapsed, plummeting by more than 85% in a single year. The search for a buyer became desperate. American truck manufacturers weren't interested in a struggling competitor. Financial investors didn't understand the trucking industry's complexities. Freightliner needed someone who saw long-term potential, not just current problems. Enter Daimler-Benz, the German automotive giant. They'd been watching the American truck market for years, looking for an entry point. Mercedes-Benz cars had established the company's reputation for engineering excellence, but they had no presence in commercial vehicles outside Europe. Daimler's executives saw what American companies missed. The US truck market was huge and growing. Deregulation was creating opportunities for efficient operators. Environmental regulations would favor companies with advanced engineering capabilities. Most importantly, American truck manufacturers were focused on short-term profits instead of long-term innovation. The negotiation process took months. Daimler wanted to understand everything about American trucking regulations, dealer relationships, and customer expectations. They studied Freightliner's engineering capabilities, manufacturing facilities, and employee skills. For Freightliner employees, the prospect of German ownership created mixed emotions. Fear dominated initially. Would Daimler shut down American operations and import trucks from Europe? Would German management understand American trucking culture? Would jobs disappear as efficiency improved? But hope emerged as negotiations progressed. Daimler committed to keeping Freightliner's Portland headquarters and manufacturing facilities. They promised investment in new product development. Most importantly, they understood that success required maintaining Freightliner's connection to American drivers and customers. The deal closed in 1981, transferring ownership from Consolidated Freightways to Daimler-Benz. Daimler-Benz agreed to pay at least $225 million for Consolidated Freightways' US and Canadian manufacturing assets. For the German company, it was a strategic investment in the world's largest truck market. For American truck manufacturing, it marked a turning point. Foreign ownership of a major U.S. truck brand was unprecedented. The industry wondered whether German engineering discipline could coexist with American trucking traditions. The American truck was now owned by Germans, but the first truck Daimler would heavily invest in wouldn't be a lean, efficient cab-over. It would be the complete opposite, a long-nosed conventional that looked like a classic American muscle car, and that truck would prove to be the key to their conquest of the entire U.S. market. Freightliner's employees now worked for a foreign corporation, marking a significant transition in the company's ownership structure. Their aluminum truck revolution had survived. Now, under German ownership, everything would depend on whether Daimler-Benz understood what made Freightliner special. The culture shock was immediate. German engineers arrived in Portland with clipboards, stopwatches, and very different ideas about how trucks should be built. They measured everything twice, documented every process, and questioned decisions that Freightliner had made for decades. American workers watched nervously as their new German bosses analyzed production lines with scientific precision. The casual, relationship-based culture that had defined Freightliner suddenly faced rigid European standards for quality control and manufacturing efficiency. But something unexpected happened. Instead of imposing German methods, Daimler's engineers listened to what American truckers actually needed. They studied driver feedback, analyzed maintenance records, and spent time at truck stops learning about real-world operating conditions. The Mercedes-Benz influence became obvious in safety systems. European trucks had featured advanced braking systems, stability control, and crash protection for years. American trucks were built tough, but they weren't necessarily built smart. Daimler invested heavily in plant modernization. Computer-controlled manufacturing replaced manual assembly processes. Robotic welding systems improved consistency in aluminum construction. Quality control systems caught defects before trucks left the factory. Daimler's first order wasn't about shutting down, it was about modernizing the highway. They ruthlessly abandoned the cab-over design that had built Freightliner's reputation and bet everything on conventional trucks. The FLD series was their answer. Long-nosed, powerful, and completely opposite to everything Leyland James had envisioned. But it worked. The FLD series became Freightliner's answer to Peterbilt's legendary 379 and Kenworth's iconic W900. These conventional trucks combined German engineering precision with American styling and comfort preferences. The FLD 120 became an instant classic. It featured the aerodynamic efficiency that Freightliner was known for, but in a conventional long-nose design that drivers preferred. The cab was quieter than competitors, the ride quality was better, and the fuel economy exceeded anything else in its class. Market share battles intensified throughout the 1980s. Daimler's deep pockets allowed Freightliner to compete on financing terms, warranty coverage, and dealer support. They could afford to invest in research and development while competitors struggled with economic downturns. The quality improvements were dramatic. Warranty claims dropped significantly as German manufacturing standards took effect. Dealers reported fewer customer complaints and higher satisfaction scores. Fleet managers discovered that Freightliner trucks required less maintenance and had better uptime. Driver feedback was overwhelmingly positive. The new trucks were more comfortable for long-haul operations. The cabs were better insulated from noise and vibration. The ergonomics improved driver productivity and reduced fatigue. But Daimler's ambitions extended beyond just fixing Freightliner. They began acquiring other American truck brands to build a comprehensive portfolio. Sterling Trucks gave them access to the vocational market. Western Star provided a premium brand for specialized applications. The acquisition strategy created synergies that benefited all brands. Shared engineering resources reduced development costs. Common components improved economies of scale. Coordinated dealer networks provided better customer coverage. By the early 1990s, Freightliner had regained its position as America's leading heavy truck manufacturer. Market share grew steadily as customers recognized the improved quality and reliability. The German investment had transformed a struggling company into an industry leader. The transformation wasn't just about manufacturing. Daimler brought a long-term perspective that American companies often lacked. Instead of maximizing quarterly profits, they invested in technologies that would pay off over years or decades. Environmental regulations became a competitive advantage. Daimler's experience with European emission standards helped Freightliner comply with increasingly strict American requirements. Their engines ran cleaner and more efficiently than competitors who were scrambling to meet new regulations. The dealer network expansion accelerated under German ownership. Daimler understood that customer service was just as important as product quality. They invested in dealer training, diagnostic equipment, and parts availability to ensure customers could keep their trucks running. Technology integration began in earnest during this period. Electronic engine controls improved fuel efficiency and reduced emissions. Computerized diagnostics helped mechanics identify problems faster. Communication systems allowed fleet managers to track vehicle location and performance remotely. The success attracted attention from competitors and industry analysts. How had a German company succeeded where American manufacturers had struggled? The answer was simple. They combined European engineering discipline with American market knowledge. Workers who had initially feared German ownership now appreciated the job security that came with belonging to a financially stable global corporation. Daimler's commitment to American manufacturing was proven through continued investment in facilities and employment. The cultural integration took time, but it ultimately strengthened both organizations. German engineers learned about American trucking conditions and customer preferences. American workers adopted quality standards and manufacturing processes that made them more competitive globally. By the mid-1990s, the transformation was complete. Freightliner was no longer just an American truck owned by Germans. It had become something new, a global manufacturer that understood both European engineering excellence and American market demands. The aluminum revolution that Leyland James had started in the 1930s had evolved into something bigger. Under Daimler ownership, Freightliner was positioned to lead the American trucking industry into the 21st century. The new millennium brought Freightliner's biggest gamble since the aluminum revolution. The Cascadia project would either cement their leadership or hand the market to competitors who were catching up fast. Aerodynamics had become the new battleground. Fuel prices were climbing, and fleet managers demanded every fraction of a mile per gallon they could get. Freightliner's engineers knew that traditional truck shapes were hitting the limits of efficiency. The Cascadia development team started with a clean sheet of paper. They used wind tunnels and computer modeling to design the most aerodynamic truck shape possible. Every curve, every panel gap, every mirror placement was optimized to slice through the air with minimal resistance. The result looked nothing like traditional American trucks. The Cascadia's rounded corners and sloped surfaces reminded some people of European designs. But the wind tunnel data was undeniable. This truck could achieve fuel economy improvements of up to 3% over Freightliner's previous models, with competitive performance against other manufacturers. Fuel efficiency wars intensified as Volvo and PACCAR invested heavily in their own aerodynamic designs. The Swedish and European manufacturers brought decades of experience with fuel-efficient trucks to the American market. They understood that rising diesel prices would force American fleets to prioritize efficiency over traditional styling. Freightliner's German engineering heritage became a crucial advantage. Daimler's European truck division had been building aerodynamic vehicles for years. They shared wind tunnel data, manufacturing techniques, and design philosophies that helped the Cascadia team avoid costly mistakes. The technology integration accelerated dramatically during this period. GPS navigation systems became standard equipment, helping drivers find efficient routes and avoid traffic delays. Electronic logging devices replaced paper logbooks, improving compliance with hours of service regulations while reducing paperwork burdens. Satellite communication systems allowed fleet managers to track vehicle location and performance in real time. They could monitor fuel consumption, engine performance, and driver behavior from their offices. This data helped identify maintenance needs before breakdowns occurred and optimize routing for maximum efficiency. Manufacturing expansion reflected Freightliner's growing global ambitions. New assembly plants in Mexico and other locations reduced production costs while maintaining quality standards. The globalization of truck production allowed Daimler to serve markets worldwide while leveraging economies of scale. But the expansion created challenges for American workers. Some production shifted to lower-cost locations, eliminating jobs in traditional manufacturing centers. The company had to balance cost competitiveness with maintaining the engineering expertise and manufacturing quality that customers expected. The driver shortage crisis began affecting truck design priorities in ways nobody anticipated. With fewer qualified drivers available, fleets needed trucks that were easier to operate and more attractive to potential employees. Comfort features that had once been luxury options became necessities for recruiting and retention. Freightliner responded with cab designs that prioritized driver comfort and productivity. Better seating, improved climate control, and enhanced storage solutions made long-haul driving more tolerable. Automated transmissions reduced driver fatigue and made trucks accessible to drivers with less experience. The 2008 recession tested everyone's commitment to the trucking industry. Freight volumes collapsed as the economy contracted. Truck sales plummeted, and manufacturers faced the choice between cutting costs and maintaining investment in future technologies. Daimler's financial strength allowed Freightliner to weather the storm better than competitors. While other manufacturers laid off engineers and canceled development programs, Freightliner continued investing in new technologies and manufacturing capabilities. Environmental regulations became increasingly complex and demanding. The Environmental Protection Agency imposed strict limits on nitrogen oxide and particulate emissions from diesel engines. Meeting these standards required sophisticated exhaust treatment systems that added cost and complexity to every truck. Freightliner's partnership with Detroit Diesel gave them an advantage in emissions compliance. The integrated approach to engine and vehicle design allowed them to optimize the entire system for both performance and environmental compliance. Competitors who relied on multiple suppliers struggled to achieve the same level of integration. The diesel evolution continued through the decade as manufacturers learned to balance power, efficiency, and emissions. Advanced fuel injection systems, turbocharging technologies, and exhaust treatment systems transformed diesel engines into sophisticated machines that bore little resemblance to their predecessors. By 2009, Freightliner had established itself as the technology leader in American trucking. The Cascadia was gaining market acceptance and demonstrating competitive fuel economy performance against traditional competitors. The investment in aerodynamics, driver comfort, and environmental compliance was paying off as customers recognized the total cost advantages. The economic recovery that followed would create new opportunities for growth, but it would also bring new challenges as the industry grappled with autonomous driving, electrification, and changing customer expectations. The highway stretched empty ahead as Nevada Governor Brian Sandoval climbed into the cab of something that would change trucking forever. It was May 5, 2015, and the Freightliner Inspiration truck was about to become the first autonomous commercial vehicle licensed to drive itself on American highways. The Inspiration truck looked like any other Freightliner from the outside, but inside, cameras and sensors monitored every aspect of the road ahead. The truck could maintain speed, stay in its lane, and adjust for traffic without human intervention. Most remarkably, the driver didn't have to pay the needed attention. This wasn't science fiction anymore. Daimler had invested years of research and over 16,000 kilometers of testing to reach this moment. The Inspiration operated at Level 3 autonomy, meaning it could handle all driving functions on well-maintained highways in good weather and daylight conditions. The partnership with Torque Robotics began as Daimler recognized that autonomous trucking required specialized software expertise. Torque brought decades of experience in artificial intelligence and sensor technology. Together, they were developing what they called a virtual driver that could safely navigate America's highways without human oversight. The business case for autonomous trucks was compelling. Almost 90% of the truck accidents resulted from driver error. An autonomous system never got tired, never got distracted, and never made emotional decisions. For an industry struggling with driver shortages and rising insurance costs, automation offered solutions to multiple problems simultaneously. But the technology faced significant hurdles. Autonomous trucks could handle highways, but they couldn't navigate construction zones, loading docks, or city streets. The system required a human driver for the first and last miles of every trip. This hybrid approach meant trucks would need two operators, one for autonomous highway sections and another for complex driving situations. The electric revolution arrived with Tesla's Semi announcement in 2017. Suddenly, every truck manufacturer needed an electric strategy. Freightliner responded with the e-Cascadia, an all-electric version of their most successful truck designed for regional and local delivery applications. Electric trucks faced different challenges than autonomous systems. Battery weight reduced cargo capacity, charging infrastructure was limited, especially for long-haul routes. Range anxiety affected fleet managers who needed predictable delivery schedules. But for specific applications, electric trucks offered compelling advantages. The e-Cascadia targeted urban delivery markets where emissions regulations were tightening and operation costs mattered more than maximum range. Electric motors provided instant torque for city driving. Quiet operation allowed deliveries during restricted hours. Lower maintenance costs offset higher purchase prices over the vehicle's lifetime. Today, Freightliner is something Leyland James never could have imagined. A German-funded American powerhouse that dominates through foreign precision and domestic grit. They remain America's best-selling heavy truck, proving that sometimes losing your independence is the only way to win the war. From Leyland James's frustration with a heavy steel truck in the 1960s, a revolutionary idea was born: build the tool that fits the job. That idea led to a lightweight aluminum rig that redefined efficiency, a German-engineered workhorse that conquered America, and now a self-driving electric truck that promises to redefine the road itself. The technology has changed, the owners have changed, but the core mission hasn't. Because Freightliner learned a long time ago that the future doesn't belong to those who build the biggest trucks, but to those who solve the biggest problems.